everybody. Welcome to Bible Study That Doesn't Suck. This is Pastor Megan. I am here at Grace Lutheran in San Francisco, and let's talk about some of the Bible readings for this Sunday. We usually follow the lectionary, which is a 3-year cycle of Bible study readings that were created by ye oldie time church folk a long time ago. This week, there are two choices. People can choose between readings for this week or something that is called the Reign of Christ or Christ the King Sunday. And they are two very different kinds of texts that you will find in these choices. And so let me talk a little bit about why and how a pastor might choose some of these things. So it really kind of stems down to what kinds of justice do you believe in? Do you believe that justice is a thing that we work really hard and then we obtain it here on earth, on this planet, through our hard work, that we seek to end racism, that we seek to end poverty, that we seek to end all of these things, and then one day we accomplish it and ta-da! Like in a video game, we are rewarded by the presence of God being known amongst us and not being questioned. There are Bible texts that talk in this way. There are other people who think that this world is so corrupt, it's terrible, we might as well just throw it away because there's no fixing it. It's a clunker. It's a clunker of a car. No matter how much work you put into it, something else is going to break. And you might as well just put all of your hopes and dreams into a new place, a new heaven and a new earth. And in that place beyond here, whether it's heaven after you pass away or if it's a place that's going to come here, in that place, justice will happen. And so there are a lot of biblical references that talk about this being the way that justice happens. In churchy language, there is something called the now and the not yet. The now is current present day time when we are living. So there's this idea that justice can come now, or that justice comes in the not yet. Some people are so pepped up with God in a cheerleader kind of way, woohoo, about justice. They believe God's justice comes both in the now and in the future, in the not yet that is to come. And so there are also Bible texts that talk about that God's justice reigns today, tomorrow, and forevermore. There are also some other texts, like in the book of Job, that talk about justice being whatever God says it is. Because if God is the smartest, biggest, in charge person, and our job is to be obedient to God, then even if something happens and we've decided it's unjust based on our own personal standards, God can just say, dude, I'm God, I win, right? So if God is a judge, if God is always right due to being God, then any amount of arguing we might put into what is just and what is not just, any amount of work we might put into it is super irrelevant, because really God's the only decider. And no matter what happens, it is just because God said it is. Nanner poo poo, God wins, right? And this is also in the Bible, right? So the book of Job is a text that is arguing about justice. Is justice when I get good stuff? Is justice when I have karma, like when I'm punished rightly? The amount of bad things that I do is equivalent to the number of bad things I experience. Is justice whatever God says? Nanner poo poo, I'm God and you're not. You weren't there when I created everything. How could you possibly judge with any way of knowing? And then there's this other idea of justice that Jesus brings up, and it's really convoluted and complicated and hard to figure out. It happens most clearly in the book of Matthew, where Jesus says, whatever measurement you use to judge other people or to measure them, however you measure up other people is the exact same measurement that God is going to use on you. So if you are super critical, no one can ever do anything right, then God's going to be super critical and never think you do anything right. If you are always lenient, you err on the side of giving people the benefit of the doubt, and when they've done something wrong, you you forgive them quickly, then God is going to be someone who errs on the side of generosity and forgives people quickly. This is a way of talking about what is called the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And it is something that is found in most all major religions, this idea that you should treat other people the way you want to be treated yourself. And the interesting thing is that, so all of these types of justice are in the Bible. And so when you are trying to figure out how to rule a country faithfully, how to appoint someone to the judicial system, how to be faithful police officers, you could pick any one of these forms of justice, or you could pick all of them. It wouldn't make sense if you picked all of them because they don't really jive with each other. And some of them work against each other. Oh, and then there's this other parable that I think is fun to add into the mix. It's called the parable of the nagging widow. And Jesus says that God is like a judge who does not give justice to the widow. But the widow keeps nagging, coming back again and again and again and again and again. Bring me justice, bring me justice, bring me justice, bring me justice. And then finally, the judge gives the widow justice, not because the judge agrees with her, not because the judge is compelled to do the right thing, not because of anything other than wanting to make this woman who is annoying go away. Right? Been there, done that. And so what I think Scripture is trying to do is to show us the complexity of our own natures, the complexity of our own ways of judging other people in the world. We are complex humans, and maybe on a good day when we're well fed and rested and have enough liquids and we're not having any fears of our imminent danger, we're able to have the noblest, highest, bestest justice, whichever one you think is the best. On other days when we haven't eaten, we woke up on the wrong side of the bed, we have a migraine, we're not able to have the best kinds of justice, and so maybe naggy justice is all we can handle that day. It's not up to us to rank different kinds of justice and say this kind of justice is better than that kind of justice, because all of these questions could be a rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland that takes you down a journey and you never get out of it again. You could argue your whole life and still be no closer to knowing which types of these justices are the best. You could also argue your whole life and still have no idea, unless God talks to you through a burning bush or through a dream or a vision, what kind of justice God wants for you and for us in the world. And so maybe Dietrich Bonhoeffer would argue is that God's judgment is diverse and multivalent. So in a book called Sanctorum Communio, Dietrich Bonhoeffer writes his doctoral thesis. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, by the way, was a Lutheran theologian and professor who lived in Germany during the Holocaust, who participates in a plot to try to kill Hitler, is caught when they are not successful, and ends up dying in a concentration camp. And Dietrich was trying to figure out, how can I do something that the Bible tells me is wrong always, kill someone, and feel like God is calling me to do it? So he was wrestling with some of these complicated intersections of complexity when it comes to justice and how God works in the world. And so Bonhoeffer argues well before he even encounters Hitler, right? Because this is his doctoral thesis. This is his prep work for his life that is to come. He argues that God's judgment is layered and way more complex than we could ever figure out. So for example, say in my personal life, I am patient and loving. I forgive people. I err on the side of trusting them. And so according to that idea in the book of Matthew, that whatever measurement I use, that God will use on me, then God's going to be lenient and patient. And I am just have nothing to worry about when it comes to the judgment of God. But I am a part of a church community. Let's imagine that this was the case. I'm not saying it is the case here, that if there's a crumb on the floor, if somebody didn't lock the door, If the recycling doesn't get sorted properly, man, they're going to be mad forever. But I'm a part of this church community, and because this dynamic exists, I am also responsible for it. I'm a part of it. And so, on the same measure of that Matthew text of the measurement that you use for others is the measurement God will use for you, I am guilty as a part of this congregation. But I'm also a part of a city. I live in San Francisco. We're a sanctuary community, which means that we err on the side of safety and compassion for types of people who might have broken one particular law, but we have the idea that they are good people. And so on the level of my city, again, judged to be awesome, right? We could pick any issue, right? We could go back and forth on any of these issues, but I live in the United States, and in the United States, there is racial injustice, and there are a lot of people who are unfairly incarcerated, and there's all of these ways in which we are super judgy. And so because this is a wide, diverse country, and I am a member of I'm a United States citizen, and by virtue of being a part of this community, the United States, which hasn't always been just to the Native Americans or to other places we've colonized, I'm guilty again. But I'm a part of this planet, and overall in the planet, right? See, I could go on forever. And that's just one of the types of justice, using the Matthew, the measurement you use for others. We could go through all those same levels. There are some people who would argue in my personal life, I'm not following all of the Deuteronomic, all of the Levitical laws, all of the really strict keep things separate that ought to be separate laws. So I'm failing on that standpoint, but I'm a part of a city that might be winning, right? So you could take every single type of those many, 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 many types of biblical justice that I talked about, and then look at all the different layers of the different types of communities that we're in, and see that God can maybe perhaps judge us differently based on all of those things. And then how does God sort it out, right? If there's 12 categories of types of justice, the now and the not yet, and the measurements and the hey 99, and then there's 12 different connections that I have, and ways that, like, as my family might be awesome, but my city might be terrible. How does God sift through all of this? Well, Dietrich Bonhoeffer says that God's ways of judging are unknowable. We can't imagine them. We can't figure them out. We can't predict them. We must have the ability to see how tangled up we are, right? None of us can say, I'm amazing in every sphere of my life. I am amazing all the time. I'm amazing according to every type of biblical judgment. I'm amazing in every layer of connection that I have. I'm amazing. I'm just amazing. So none of us can claim that we are 100% perfect and 100% amazing, or that we are for certain God is going to judge us in every aspect of our life, in every type of justice, in every type of biblical understanding of how God views us. And so it's complex. But what he also says, in agreement with Paul, who writes that nothing, neither death nor life, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, can ever separate us from the love of God, that even if you spent your whole life figuring out what's the best kind of justice model, how you would be judged in all the intricate layers, even if you spent your whole life studying all of this, it would not matter, because the amount of forgiveness that someone who never spent any moment in their entire life trying to figure out how this judgment and justice works, they get it just as equally by virtue of the fact that Jesus lived and died and resurrected. And so this salvation that comes from God 2,000 years ago, so long ago that I can't screw it up, right? This gift of grace that I am given by virtue of my baptism, I can't untangle it, because God has declared that I am forgiven and I am saved. Then who am I to have the ability to screw it up, or the ability, maybe, the ability to decide if my neighbor gets it too? So it's all complicated, right? It's all complicated. Even if we had all the time in the world, we'd never be able to figure it out, is my perspective. Maybe that's because I'm let's go do good things in the world instead of studying about doing good things in the world kind of person. So when you come to choose these texts, it's a complicated task, because if you pick the texts that are for the week, the Sunday between November 13th and November 19th, you can choose these texts from Isaiah. I'm about to create a new heaven and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice, right? Remember this idea of this far off new thing that is going to be just because we couldn't possibly fix the thing that we have currently? That's the Isaiah text, right? And you can kind of see in there will be no more weeping. No more will there be an infant that lives but a few days, an old person that does not live out a lifetime. No one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth, and one who falls short of 100 will be considered cursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat out of them. And so there's this idea that things are going to be awesome because God's going to bring the new heaven and the new earth, and it's going to be woohoo, right? So how do you choose between that and the Christ the King Sunday Old Testament reading, which is basically everything is terrible, I'm going to destroy it, from the book of Jeremiah? I myself would destroy the shepherds and scatter the sheep. Sorry, woe to the shepherds who destroy and scatter the sheep. Therefore says God, concerning the shepherds who shepherd my people, it is you who have scattered my flock and driven them away, and you have not attended to them. So I will attend to your evil doings, and I myself will gather the remnant of the flock of all the lands that I have driven them, and I will bring them back to the fold, and they shall be fruitful and multiply and rise up. So God's going to destroy everything that's terrible, and then it's going to be great again. It's going to be awesome. Hi. So how do you pick? Is something new coming that's better and awesome? Is it not? And then we have the two different versions from the two different Luke readings about how we understand what Jesus is up to in the world. And so we have a story where Jesus is talking about the temple, which is the spot where they thought that God's thumb touched the earth and calmed the world. And this idea that all the stones of the temple are going to be torn down, that there will be wars, that bad things will happen, but that you will be safe. And the metaphor in Luke's gospel is that then God's presence is going to be known in everywhere, not just in one particular spot, right? So this is an active God that's using destruction to kind of create things in the world. But in the Christ the King, reign of Christ Sunday, the Luke text is about Jesus being on the cross and people making fun of Jesus, saying that he could save himself if he wanted to, but instead he's going to lie there and die. Right? So on one hand, you have a text where God is actively disrupting and moving and rearranging. And then in the other text, you have a God who is going for the purpose of showing restraint, I guess, or not being showy or flashy, is going to die on the cross. And makes no sense, right? So it's a hard time to pick the text that you think represents your idea of justice. It's a hard time to pick a text about Jesus and what you think an active God looks like in the world. And I guess I told you this whole convoluted story, maybe in the way that Rachel Maddow would, in telling you what seems like a completely unrelated story about justice, so that you can kind of see the moral beyond these texts, which is that they are texts about people who are yearning for justice to happen in the world with different means about how to achieve them, and no foregone conclusion about how to make that happen because we haven't found it or seen it yet. And maybe what is the scariest is that we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see. But if justice comes because we get to work with shovels and pitchforks and we clean the barn, we can't entirely just wait and see. We have to try now to bring justice here, wait and see if new justice comes in a place because it isn't possible to fix up this junker of a wagon. We have to do the best we can. We have to trust that God understands how, complicated and complex this idea of judging is. We have to rest assured in our salvation. We have to understand that fancy things, the spaces where God brings calm to the earth, might be thrown away, and that might be for good. We might have to sometimes notice that even though God could save something, God chooses not to for a bigger plan that might mean something in the future. And all of this is complicated, but if you rest on any single one of them, you miss part of the picture. And our scriptures are not meant. It's Bible study that doesn't suck, because it's not Bible study that says, here's the exact right answer, memorize it, let's take a test. It's Bible study that says scriptures are as complicated as justice, and as complicated as the ways that justice can happen in this world. And so if you are ever confused by scripture, or you have this one text where you're like, why does it say that? That's so stupid. Then you're not alone. First of all, you're not alone. And perhaps that text isn't for you. If scripture is for all the people of all the earth, in all the times of the earth, then not every verse has to be for us, because if every verse is for us, then we are selfish to think that this entire beautiful, faithful book is for me in this time, in this place, in this moment of my life, in this moment of my maturity, in this moment of what's happening politically. Really, it's more likely that if there is a God who is creating a sacred text, that there might be parts that were for the ancient Egyptians, and parts that are for the distant future that I can't understand, and parts that are for me today. So find the parts that speak to you, find the justice work that you can do, and do it. And when you find moments where light pierces the darkness and you know that justice is happening, because there it is, hold on to it and pay attention, because yes, there are moments where God is here right now. There are moments when justice is here right now. There are moments when it's impossible for justice to ever come because things are happening that are so unjust they can never be rectified. The fact that slavery and the Holocaust happens makes any rationally thinking person wonder how this world can be declared good by a good God. And so it is simultaneously true that justice is glimpsable and findable and palpable and creatable, as it is true that justice could never possibly happen here on this earth and can only happen in a new place. It's complex. It makes no sense. There's no easy answers. And that's why people need to be on a path of faith rather than a quiz of faith. And my hope is that the questioning, the possibilities, and these flickering glimpses of justice and God in our world will inspire you to keep going. That in moments of hopelessness, that you can await the not yet just world that is coming, the new heaven and the new earth. And in moments of happiness and bliss and celebration, that you can rejoice in the justice that is already here. Dear friends, do what is yours. Let go of what is not. Take care, and I will see you next week.